Not the Life with Naz. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Laughter for All podcast. I am Comedian Nazareth. Thank you so much for joining us for episode number 116. 116. Add weeks to that. That's more than 2 years. We started here before the pandemic. So we thank you for joining us. Thank you for subscribing. I want to encourage you to really subscribe. Tell your friends. I think that's the best marketing. If you were blessed by any of our episodes, if it helped you, if it answered a question for you, if it did anything for you, just be kind, be generous, subscribe, tell your friends about it, share it on your social media. That's the way other people know about it, and they get blessed. So it's not going to make us any more money or any more famous, but it will help other people. And that's the goal from this Laughter for All podcast. Uh, you know, before I bring our guest, I just want to remind you about the vitamins that I've been taking for almost a year now. And they've been very helpful to me, especially with the inflammations I have. So let's listen to the doctor who is the CEO of the company, and he tells you more about it. So let's
all
welcome.
levels and also helping and supporting a healthy immune system. And the same products that you would be taking, the adaptive stem, even mental clarity, they have ingredients in there that will adjust cholesterol. They are there to support a healthy cholesterol level in the body. So, I mean, the beauty behind the six products that I know that you have on your, probably even on your store, that you've been introduced to, is that
Uh,
they're very universal. They have the ability to flex in a lot of different directions. I can tell you the Imu stem. I don't know if you have a
mhm.
bottle of that right there,
Yes,
but
I do. The stem is right here. Uh, yes, this one. Yeah.
that that would be something I would definitely put your friend on. That is directed towards balancing blood levels, cholesterol levels, and also helping and supporting a healthy immune system.
Alrighty, that was Dr. Malay. And if you have cholesterol, if you have high blood pressure, if you have inflammations, arthritis like I do, then you can use these vitamins that will help you out. So go to gethealthywithNaz.com, get him. And if you put under shipping Nazareth, you'll get free shipping. Yes, my name has some power with UPS and FedEx and the US Post Office. Anyway, right now, I'm excited to introduce a new friend of mine. This young man, I met him recently. He sent me an email, I think last week or the week before, saying that he saw my show, and since he started doing comedy, and I looked him up and found out that he's going to be close. He lives close to where I'm going to be in Ohio. So we decided that we're going to do a Laughter for All outreach. Laughter for All outreaches, if you're following us, Laughter for All is a nonprofit ministry I started 7 years ago. And the goal from that is to be able to do free comedy nights for people who cannot afford to pay to go see a live concert with music and comedy or just comedy. So what we did is we prayed about it, and God opened the door for us to be able to rent stadiums, sports arenas, churches, uh, you know, big outdoor pavilions, and invite people for free. And before the pandemic, we were able to give 1,000 bags of food and 1,000 toys each event. When we did those events, and we're allowed to do that, so it's really good. So during the pandemic, our hands were cuffed. We couldn't do much, but in February 19th, we're going to be in Franklin, Indiana to do a Laughter for All comedy outreach where people can come for free, invite their friends, unsafe friends, or any friends, anyone who needs to laugh. Solomon said there's a time to weep, but there's also a time to laugh. We've done enough weeping. It's time for us to laugh. So if you're in Indiana or near Indiana or anywhere in that area, invite your friends on the 19th at Turning Point Church in Franklin, Indiana. But the young man that I'm telling you about, his name is Haas Ridgway. He has been entertaining groups of all sizes since the 90s, has performed in over 30 states and few countries. He has made audience laugh in clubs, cruises, churches, and large corporations. He used stand up comedy, impressions, crazy sound effects, and musical comedy to bring his unique style of comedy to crowds all over the US. He has recorded a dry bar special and is a regular at the Mike Huckabee Show. Let's welcome my new friend, Haas Ridgway. Hey, Haas, how are you?
I'm good, blessed. How are you doing?
Wonderful, wonderful. I think we either look like we're going hunting or we work for the FBI. We're
You,
both wearing vests like that.
that's right. We are just both getting. I don't know if there's any Kevlar in this or not, but it's awesome. It's warm.
Where's Franklin, Indiana?
It's right outside of Indianapolis, about 20 miles south, and so it's hard to even see that there's a difference between Franklin and Indianapolis when you head north. You just kind of there's a few cornfields and then businesses all the way into the skyscrapers, so it's not too far.
Really? The
Yeah,
skyscrapers are in Indianapolis or in Franklin?
not Franklin, Indianapolis. Yeah, I think.
Wonderful.
Yeah, there's not too many tall buildings here. Maybe a few downtown, but nothing.
Now you're a comedian, but you're also on staff at the church.
That's correct. I'm the senior minister at the Turning Point Church here in
You
Franklin.
are the pastor. You are
I
the
am.
senior man.
That's
How
correct.
is how does that work with your? You write a new bit and you feel the urge to use it. Does your audience know that? They're
Yeah, the only
used to
time
that.
I yeah, the only time I get in trouble for comedy is when I don't use enough. They come up to me and said, "Now this week you didn't use a whole lot of comedy," and I'm like, "Well, it was Easter, so maybe we shouldn't have done too much." But no, I sometimes I just make up something on the fly. And I remember a few weeks ago, one of the guys at our church, he owns a clean comedy club in Greenwood, and I said something that just off the cuff that was funny, and I looked at him and I said, "Write that down," and he just texted it to me right away. So
Oh, that's funny. That's a Greenwood. Who's that? Is that what Dennis?
Dennis and Steve, yeah, they both go to our church. So
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
that's a club.
yeah.
What do you call it? The Gutties.
Gutty's Comedy Club. Yeah, it's a clean comedy club. They
Yeah.
got one there, and then they have one in Minnesota.
Yes, yes, yes. I was invited to there in May, but with the schedule, it was very difficult to be able to do that. But one day I will do that. I love Dennis. I don't know the other gentleman, but Dennis is really a good guy. Now, if you have to choose between pastoring and doing full time stand up comedy, what would you do?
I'm sorry, the connection is bad. No, I was kidding. I can't
Yeah,
I
right.
can't
Yeah,
choose. That's
right.
kind of like asking me to choose between Star Wars and Star Trek. Can't I like both? I've chosen to do both for the last, I don't know, 18 years. There's been opportunities just to go and do comedy, but we've always wanted to be tethered to a church. But that sounds bad, but I mean that in a good way. That we can be a part of a church.
What's easier for you, prepare a sermon or perform comedy?
Oh, well, I would go
Right.
with what's easier is probably comedy at this point. But when I first did comedy, I would have been like, I'll write 10 sermons to one joke because I get nervous about, is this going to be funny? Are there going to be a reaction? But so I think that, right now comedy is just, because I've had so many reps, it feels really natural. But I enjoy both.
Now, as far as how did you start doing comedy?
Oh,
I
man.
mean,
So
is it professionally or whatever? You know what I mean?
right. Well, I'd done a few little gigs here and there, and I just kind of did them for nothing. And there's a few people that paid me, but I was just doing it because I love to do it. And then in the early 2000s, I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and I had really not had any experience with Christian comedy. I knew that it existed out there, but I hadn't been around it. And then all of a sudden, the Banana series came out where I saw you and many other guys, and I was like, "Oh, this is so cool!" And I'm at dinner at a Ruby Tuesdays in Nashville, Tennessee, with a bunch of youth ministers, and I'm just making them all laugh the whole time. And they said, "You're going on stage tonight." I'm like, "I'm not going on stage tonight." Sonic Flood is going to be on stage tonight. There's no
Oh, I
way.
remember.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not going to be on stage. There's Sonic Flood coming, and they told the MC that I was a professional comedian, and I'd only done little bitty things, told basically dad jokes or sermon jokes, and he got up and said, "Haas Ridgeway, the comedian's going to do 10 minutes while we're waiting on Sonic Flood to show up." And so I just remember those 3 steps, and I said, "It's now or never," and I just
Right.
gave him 10 minutes of Chris Farley, if he was your preacher, and just did this
Oh,
whole
that's
sermon.
funny.
Yeah, and I was like, "Let me tell you a little bit," and I did the whole thing, and I've been booked all over the country ever since.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because it was a youth ministers conference, so everybody's an event planner that was in the room. So
Right,
that
right.
was pretty crazy. Yeah.
Man, did you know when you went up on stage? Did you know that what you were gonna do, or it was just like boom? They
Oh,
threw you
well,
there?
right before I looked at my friends and I was like, "What am I going to do?" And they said, "Just do what you did at Ruby Tuesdays." And I was like, "You mean eat a lot?" And they were like, "No, do this. The sermon is Chris Farley." And I was like, "Okay, I'm doing it." And I walked up those steps and I just started in, and it was pretty cool. And they asked me to stay on stage because they had a little time of worship, and they wanted me to work on a potter's wheel, and they did a close-up video in front of everybody because they're trying to prove that not everybody can do that. It takes the master to do that. And I knew that's what they wanted, but they didn't know that my wife owned a ceramic store with a pottery wheel, and I knew what I was doing. So
Oh,
so I intentionally messed it up after I got it way up there and made this bowl, and then I was like, I let it put my finger in it, and then it went all crazy, and I was like, okay, that crisis averted. So
well, that's funny. So your wife owns a ceramic.
she
Uh,
did it
is
several
it?
years ago. Yeah, we had a brick and mortar place where people came and painted pieces and worked on the wheel and that kind of stuff, so it's kind
So
of fun.
you got booked by these youth pastors. You
Yeah,
started going. Did you start like working, writing more, trying to come up
absolutely.
with?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
came home
did
and I told my youth group, I was like, "Guys, I did some comedy at this thing, and now I'm flying to Denver in 3 weeks, to do a show." And I was like, "I gotta start writing this set." And they started saying like, "Oh, you should tell the story you told at this youth rally." And the next kid's like, "You should tell this story that you told us last week. That was funny." And all of a sudden, they helped me develop my first set from illustrations and stories from my own life that they liked. And
wow.
so, and I just kind of embellished those stories, a little bit, and how we do in comedy. And but there's truth to almost every story that I tell, um, with jokes written for them. And so, yeah, they helped me develop the first, 30-minute set that I had.
Did you get to a point where you say, you know what, this is becoming more full time. This is there's money in it a lot more than pastoring. Did you
Yeah,
did you get to that like fork of the road and you had to make the decision to
yeah.
either keep both or?
In 2009, I was a youth minister down in Florida, and in that year, I think I had 35 shows, and it was a lot for you know to be a full-time youth minister and that. And so my wife and I talked about it, like, do I just go and do this? And she was like, just worried about the stability of stepping out of a salary and health insurance and all the things that as a minister you get. And so I guess we decided that while my daughter was still at home, and which developed into, I don't really want to leave ministry. Um, we just worked it out to where Friday and Saturday I can go do comedy. And, as long as I'm back on Sunday, and if I have to be gone on a Sunday, I take a week's vacation and just enjoy the area. So
You,
that's
you know
that's what we've
that's
been
a
doing.
that's a blessing from God, Haas. I'll tell you why.
Amen.
Because I know a lot of comedians and have worked with a lot of comedians in 30 years, and some of them had to make that decision. But the other decision, do I jump into full time doing what I love? And I'm just not just comedy. I mean, I'm talking musician, I'm talking artist, actor. Do I jump into this full time, or do I keep my day job that will limit me from even doing comedy? But in your case, you can still do comedy. You can
Yep.
still perform in the week, and we can still keep your job and keep your insurance, because that's a hard thing to do. So that's a great decision. Now, where were you born, Haas?
Where or when?
W-
I was
Where?
I was born in Virginia, and
Ah,
I was almost born in San Diego. My dad was in the Navy at the time, and
mm.
at 8 months pregnancy, my mom traveled across the country back to where family was, and I was born in Virginia.
Oh, you could have been a Californian.
I know, I was that close. I can
That
wear a
close.
T-shirt. I can wear a T-shirt that says "Made in California," but that's
Made
about
in
all I can do. Yeah,
Nowadays, that's not a good thing, but that's
no,
fine.
no.
So, so you were born, and when did you feel like, oh, I'm funny?
So my two older brothers were probably the funniest people I'd ever met, and my little brother was probably the best actor I'd ever seen. And so here I was in the middle, and everybody thought because I was a giant, you're going to play football, And of course, I didn't have the football meanness, but um, I found myself getting made fun of a lot. And so in grade school, I would go home and I would listen to records from clean comedians like Jerry Clower,
Uh-huh.
and another guy that did this thing called Phone Call from God. You remember that comedian? He had
Oh,
this Jared
no,
or no
Dennis.
Jerry. No, his name's Jerry, I think.
Oh, Jerry Crawley, Jerry something Crawley.
Yeah. Well, there's Jerry Clower, but then this guy is another guy. But anyway, he had this record called Phone Call from God, and it was just, to me as a middle schooler, I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. And so every day I go home and I listen to these records with the big headphones, and then
Uh,
I memorize little things that they would say. And I found that if I go to school and I'm the funniest guy in the room, no one makes fun of me. And
that's true.
so I became the class clown. And, when the teacher would say something, I would finally go, "Oh, my brother said this the other day," and everybody laughed. And I would say it. And then everybody would laugh. And I'd be like, "Man, this works." And suddenly I'm in control of the laughter. No one's laughing at me. They're laughing because of me. And I thought, this is awesome. And I've always stayed up late on Saturday night to watch, Weekend at the Improv. And I never forget, I saw Jeff Jenna at the Weekend at the Improv, and then I've
I
worked with
know.
him like 4 times now. And I'm like, I saw you, and I hate to say it, but when I was a kid, on my little black and white screen that was like 13 inches, in my room, and when I'm supposed to be asleep, right before the national anthem, so um, yeah.
Oh, so people think that if you're a tiny kid, you're smaller, you're the one who get bullied. But you said you're a big guy,
Yeah,
and you were big in school, 6'4". You're 6'4" now.
I'm 6'4". Yeah, and by
Yes,
by eighth grade, I was like 5'11", and I weighed about 280. I was just a big guy, and
and you still were bullied.
yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
that's interesting.
It's so funny. I remember the first time a bully hit me. I I had never been hit before, and I was on my paper route of all places, and I had made fun of him. Remember, I'm getting that quick-witted thing, trying to work it out. He
Right.
destroyed my pumpkin in our front yard, and he comes to the house, and out on the front street, he says, "You like what I did to your pumpkin?" And man, before I could think, I said, "Yeah, it looks more like you." And oops. I guess that's bully for chase me into the house, because he did. But the next day he shows up on my paper route, and everybody's telling me that he'll hurt you, he'll knock you out with one punch, and I'm in 7th grade, for the second time. Anyway, and I'm just and I'm sitting there, and he's like bowing up, and I'm like a head and shoulders taller than he is, and I'm the only one scared. He swings and hits me in the face, and this instant I remembered all that fear gave me this adrenaline, and I felt nothing. And I just remember looking at him going, "You think that hurts?" And of course, his face crumples up, because I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know I was a bleeder, because all of a sudden I feel like this warm sensation, and I was like, "Oh, I'm bleeding." Anyway, and he ran, he took off, and I was like, "Wow, I thought that was going to be worse than it was." And but
Oh,
I
you were
hated
too
that stuff.
nice.
Right, I know,
Oh,
I hated that stuff. I just never wanted to fight anybody, and I used to throw people around until the teacher got there. I'll keep looking like, they don't hear this. Everybody's yelling fight. It's like, somebody save me. And
uh,
all along I probably could have hurt somebody, but I didn't have that in me. So
Now you mentioned you did seventh grade twice, and you
yes, I
said
did.
you dropped out of high school, right?
I did. In ninth grade, I repeated a couple of grades growing up just because I was ADHD and no medicine, and I didn't really focus on anything. I'd rather again make everybody laugh than do the assignment. And so in ninth grade, I just got tired of being made fun of. I went to two different schools trying to get away from it, and it just was like it intensified at the second school I went to. And I knew I turned 16 and at the end of ninth grade, which, most people do not turn 16 at ninth grade, but I did. And I just walked in and dropped out of school. And in Kentucky, if you get a driver's license, you have to work for the state if you drop out in order to keep your driver's license. So I was suddenly signed up for the summer youth program. I'm weed eating by the railroad tracks on this, big fence next to the health department in the middle of summer, thinking, this is not what I always wanted to do. I wanted to be a minister in kindergarten, and I wanted to be a comedian, the rest of the time. And I'm thinking, what do I need to do? And I went to a summer camp. You can like this. I went to a summer camp called Future Preachers Training Camp in Nashville, Tennessee.
Wow.
And I was, a counselor, but I was also, they let me preach. And when I preached, a representative from a school in Montgomery, Alabama, a Christian college there, he was there and he said, if you get your GED, we'll give you the preaching scholarship and it's full tuition.
Wow.
And so I went home and I took a math class at the Adult Learning Center, and I spent the whole next year trying to become, finish school through GED. And I taught myself everything and almost got a perfect score on the GED. And then I went to college on my own at 17 in Montgomery, Alabama. My parents didn't even go down to the school. They never saw the school. I went by myself for 2 years. I was there, just me. And now I have a master's in Bible. So,
Wow.
it's my first year, I think I majored in ping pong. Like, don't get me wrong, because I was 17 and, 12 hours from home. But I, now I have a master's and I've been in ministry, since 92. And it's just, the rest is history, I guess you could say.
So, going from a high school dropout to getting
Right.
masters in Bible,
Right.
and what do you say to people who right now sitting, oh, I should have finished college, I should have finished this, I should have done this? What do you say to them?
If it doesn't like financially, if it doesn't like hurt your family, you're worth the investment. There was such a feeling of accomplishment when of course I did mine online, my master's, and when it came in the mail, and I'm just like, I'm walking back from the mailbox going, in 1990, I dropped out of high school. I was a statistic, and I just changed all of those statistics, and just everything that I learned along the way. It was such a great investment in my own life. And I'm just saying, like, you are worth the time that you put in to better yourself. Not everybody needs a degree. Not everybody has to go to college. If you're successful already, stand on those shoulders of your life. You don't have to do that. But if you want to do something like that and you have the means to do it, it's a wonderful accomplishment.
That's great. You're worth the investment. That's
Yeah.
that's in anything, people. People are listening and watching. That's worth it in everything. You are worth the investment to maybe go train for something, do this
Yeah,
or try
absolutely.
that, and all that. Sarah's asking, when did you being your personal relationship with Jesus Christ? When did you begin your personal relationship with Jesus Christ?
All right. Well, we'll back out and kind of do the, bird's eye view and come into it. But I was a preacher's kid, matter of fact, I have three brothers. So there's four of us, and the three of us are preachers, and my other brother is a disappointment. No, I'm just kidding. He's not. He's awesome. He's a surveyor. We talk almost every day. But so I'm a preacher's kid, and when I'm 8, I wanted to be baptized like everybody else, and so I went to my mom and asked her how to answer my dad's questions so that he would baptize me, because I wanted to take communion and lead singing at church. And I didn't have a relationship at that point, right? It was just, I did this so I could do this. And so I went to college at 17, and I'm all the way from home, and I'm sitting there at a devotional one night, and it just hit me that I'd done everything in church to be approved by other people, and to, for people to look at me or let me do stuff, right? It
Right.
wasn't because I wanted to surrender to his amazing grace, right? It wasn't any of that. I had never really committed. Matter of fact, a girl had broken up with me because she said there was no love in my relationship with God. It was just, I'm going to do all these rules and do all that. And I knew that I really had never committed my life to Christ, and I had never owned my own faith. It was always, my dad's a preacher, my uncles are preachers, everybody was in ministry. My great grandparents went to church. That's what, you're supposed to do. And so at 4:00 in the morning, I went to one of my friend's rooms and I knocked on the door, and I'll never forget, James answers the door, and I said, "Bro, I need you to baptize me." And he says, "How?" Because he came up to my chest. He just looked up and he's like, "How?" He's making a joke. He thought I was messing with him. And so we went to the church building at 4 a.m, and we passed a singing group that was practicing in the laundry room. And they were like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to get baptized right now." And they're like, "We're going with you." And they're like, so we walk over, and listen, they sang the song, "Step into the water,
Oh, that's
way
funny.
down a little bit," while I went into the baptistry. It was amazing. And that night I knew, I get chills thinking about it, but I knew that I was committing my life to him, and not using him for my own personal, lifting me up. So,
But you know what? This is funny because sometimes God does that, those little extra thing, like, oh, let's get the choir at 4 a.m. ready. So
yeah.
when he goes, it's kind of special. It's
And
more
then
than just,
he's like,
So
"Gabriel, watch this." Look, when they turn the corner, see, they're practicing. And it was crazy. It's just,
oh,
God is
that's
good, right?
now let me ask you this.
Sure.
Your dad was in the Navy.
Yes.
He was a serious guy, was
Yeah,
he? Okay.
absolutely.
I wrote a book a few years ago called "You're So Funny, Daddy: Learning How to Communicate with Your Children Using Humor." And part of we did a survey and we asked parents, and we found out that comedy leaves a legacy. So if your father was funny, then the kids are funny. But if the father is serious, we found out that half of the children were military style like their parents, but the other half deliberately attempted to be funny. Now you're saying your two other brothers were funny. That's very
Yeah,
interesting because at home I'm done. For a dad being a military, navy, and also a preacher, that was a
right.
lot of seriousness at home, right?
Yeah, and my oldest brother is probably the most serious, and I make fun of him, call him the chosen one and stuff like that. But
Mm-mm.
he's a little bit different than me. These are my favorite people in the world, are my brothers, and so he was probably the most serious, and the rest of us were just trying to, my dad, he was very strict, but at
Mm,
the same time, he liked to laugh, and
mm.
he had moments where he was like, remember the strike of the comedians in the late 80s, and that's
Yes.
when I was telling Dad, "I want to do comedy, Dad." And he's like, 10,000 comedians are out of work and you're trying to be funny, um, and later on he's like, "I said those things to you and I shouldn't have." um, he actually watched the movie I Can Only Imagine, and which was pretty incredible. He was never
Right.
mean, like he wasn't bad to me. He was a great dad, but he was not getting behind those kind of dreams. And he and I had a great conversation after that movie to say, "Hey, I should have encouraged you, because God has gifted you in a different way than He's gifted me." Because that was the big, you know, um, difference between us was, my dad has to have, for preaching, he has to have like 10 pages of notes, and I just need my PowerPoint, and
Mm,
because those things came easy to me to memorize things, and like to be in a musical and plays, and I could be off book in just a few weeks, and my dad, it took him hours and hours and hours, and he thought I was just winging it, but it turns out that's just how God gifted me. And we've had that conversation. So
You,
it's pretty
you
cool.
know, I know this is a laughter for all podcast, but you're a pastor.
Yeah.
What kind of challenges you guys go through? I mean, I know because I'm surrounded. I have with pastors friends,
Yeah.
but people don't know. People are watching. What kind of challenges you guys go through as pastors?
Probably one of the biggest challenges that I've faced my entire life is that, when people get upset by even just a perception of what has happened or what they think you might have said, they come at you hard. They use their words, and they even raise their voice. And one of the challenges that I've had that I knew I needed to do was I couldn't respond in the way that people came at me.
Mm,
Because it's kind of like football on TV. It's not the first guy that throws a punch that gets the penalty. It's the second guy. And so if I respond in kind, and Jesus said not to, right? If I respond in kind, that's all the other people in church are going to hear. You can't believe what Haas said to me. He was so angry, and I was like, well, what did you do? Like, how did you go to Haas?
they won't ask that.
Right. And so that's one of the challenges. Another challenge is just that we're real. We're people. I mean, I've got struggles like everybody else. My family has struggles. My daughter has struggles. You can paint all the pictures you want on Facebook. And believe me, I'm part of doing that. Everybody's smiling on Facebook, but we all have those things, and we need time. When our family needs us, we need time to be able to do that. And sometimes, people get mad because you couldn't be somewhere because you were being somewhere for your family, and everybody has to remember that. And I want to be with somebody who's hurting. I want to be with people who need me, and but my family needs me too. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles of being a pastor.
How did the COVID impacted you and your family financially?
Well, my wife was a insurance salesman at Allstate and didn't meet her quota because nobody was changing anything. Everybody was worried, and so they let her
Right.
go. And then,
Oh,
like 6 of my biggest shows were all canceled, and that was always my bonus money was going somewhere to do comedy. So pretty much
right.
all of from I guess March of 2020, that rest of that year, I don't think I made any money on comedy. Maybe I did a few shows for $100 or $200 here or there or whatever, but
Right.
it was difficult. And my wife, it took her a long time. Everybody was saying everybody's hiring, and of course she couldn't find one. And so we had to live off credit for a long time. So it takes a while to crawl back out of those holes that you're in. But I think that God is still, I mean, He still blessed us. I mean, I'm not saying financially. We were drawn together during that time,
Mm.
and of course I had to learn to become a televangelist overnight, right? So,
Right.
you know,
Zoom.
preaching to a camera without any response from anybody on the other side. That's a hard thing to do. Everybody goes, "Where's all the jokes?" And I'm like, "There's no one to laugh." So I'm like not telling jokes. I'm just teaching the sermon and being done. So
That's true.
that's some of the struggles there. But
I have a question from Michael Ramirez. It says, as a comedian, if you're having a bad day and you have a show, is it hard to be funny?
oh yeah, um, you know, there's been times like there's an open mic at Gutty's every Monday night, and everybody's trying to do their clean stuff. And there's been times where I've had a bad day, and they're texting me, "Are you coming to the club to do open mic?" And I'm like, I don't know if I can be funny today, you know.
Hmm.
But when I have a show, it's like, oh, they're depending on me, and so I try to get where I'm going early, and I try to get some alone time, and just remember that old adage that the show must go on. um, and and as soon as people start laughing, it's like healing to my soul, right? and laughter is the best medicine, even if it's somebody else's laughter for
Right.
me. And if I'm making you laugh, man, for the next hour, if I'm doing an hour show, I have forgotten about all my problems. And I am
That's
just in the zone of my comedy and my jokes and the stories I'm telling. And it's pretty cool.
It's interesting because comedians, that, but some people who don't do comedy is like when you're on stage, you're on this flee or fight mode because your
Yes,
endorphin is kicking in, and
absolutely.
just imagine you see people in an earthquake or a fire or something, and they see a loved one that's already boom, maybe had no hope, they died. You still have to run. You still have to
Yeah.
get away. Yeah, so your mind goes into I need to survive. And that's the same thing when you're on stage, you're in survival mode. So you're not thinking about what happened. I remember the day my dad died and the day my son was born, I 2 hours later I had to be on stage. And
Wow.
you go into automatic pilot like we do
Yeah.
when we just want to get the show. Okay, let me just I can't be in the moment right now, but I'm gonna give him the material. But no, I'm sure a church is a comfort zone when you do comedy in a church, but when you go to do a corporation or a club, how do
Yeah.
you how do you change your act to fit that?
I actually don't change anything. Um, I had to learn something over the pandemic because the only place I could really do anything was open mic, and then I got a few opportunities during that to be at Gutty's to headline and feature for other comedians and to small crowds because nobody wanted to go out, and so I learned how to. The only difference is like at a church you can kind of ramble on in a joke and
Mm.
everybody's going to give you some grace. You can give a little extra details, but at a club they're about word economy, and so I got to get to the punch faster or I'm going to lose this audience. And so that's the only difference. It's not about content because I mean, even though I'm a Christian man, a minister, my comedy is just good, clean comedy. It's not, hey, how about that Moses guy? He's a real basket case or something. That's a terrible dad joke. But anyway,
Yeah, I know.
but
It is terrible.
it is. But I mean, I'm not going to tell. I don't tell very many of those jokes. And
Yeah, I
so
see.
that's the only difference is like I tightened everything up and threw away all the extra words and like Taylor Mason one time told me, he said I opened for him at Harding University, and he said, come to New York, open for me, and you only got like 5 minutes tops. And I was like, whatever. And then I did a club, and I was like, I only have 6 minutes. He was close, so because I'm doing a 45-minute show everywhere else, and I'll lose them if I did all of the stuff that I was doing before. So,
Right, right. Now, what do you call it? So, do you sometimes, when you're doing a corporation or a club or a cruise, you tell them you're a minister?
it depends. Like the other day, I did a show in Ohio and at an Elks Club. So it was
Oh,
supposed to be a clean show. Like that's why I signed up for it. I was headlining, and the opener, a great guy. I love this guy. He was not clean that day, and I'd never heard
oh,
him do some of the stuff that he did, and I was like, wow. And I actually told the lady that was introducing me, I said, don't, or the female comedian that was introducing me, I said, don't tell them I'm a minister. Let me just show them. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna be who God called me to be, because I think it would really make them uncomfortable after hearing what they had heard. Does that make sense? I'm not
yeah.
ashamed of it, and when people came up to me, and it came out in the middle of my comedy, I would say that I'm a minister and that kind of stuff because I did I'm a minister, my brother's a minister, and one's a disappointment joke, and it landed, and everybody's like, "You really a minister?" And like, yeah, and so that was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, everybody knows by the time my show is over that I do that.
Any embarrassing shows you remember? Not just bombing or something, but I mean, something happened.
Yeah. Okay. So a friend of mine, he said, my dad's church called and they want you to do the seniors banquet. And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be great. Because I did one seniors banquet and it went well. I mean, I started the joke with, I can tell this is a seniors banquet because the stool that you provided for the comedian even has a doily on it, and, and so I'm at this, I show up and brother, half the people were in wheelchairs and not home, if that makes any
Ooh.
sense.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, the staff that was serving lunch was loving my show. Everybody else, clueless,
No.
So it was just hard to do a whole show. And I'm like, they've already given me a paycheck. I've got to do this show. And they're not getting my jokes, And
Oh, that's
now that I've been doing it for a lot longer, I know how to act at those audiences. I know what stories to tell. So
right.
just
I
didn't that
remember.
day. Yeah.
I know. And I remember the last, not to make you feel bad, but the last show I did long time ago for seniors, I would tell the joke, and then I'm going in the second joke, and they're just telling each one like what they missed. They're still going over the first joke, so
Yeah.
I learned to be quiet and repeat the joke and all that. But that's yeah. Any times or travel times where things were crazy, something funny, horrible, embarrassing.
Well, one of the most interesting shows that I ever did was I was asked by the Future Business Leaders of America in West Virginia at their
Mm.
convention to do comedy. And so I flew to West Virginia, and my brother was in Ohio, so he came down and picked me up, and so we went to the show together. And I walk in the auditorium, and there's only like 6 kids, and I said, "What? Am I that early?" They said, "No, we made it optional." And I was like,
Ah,
"Oh, really?" And so I'm up there doing my first few minutes, my intro, and they're all on their phones, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm just going to have to make this a dress rehearsal for my next show because
uh,
they've already gone to their phones. But what I found out in the next 10 minutes was this. They were texting all their friends saying, "He is funny. You should get over here." And they started running in and they filled the room. It was so cool.
oh, that's
But
amazing.
but at the beginning, it was like, if I had given up just by the people that was in the room, that wouldn't have happened. They would have said, "You're right, he stinks. Don't come." And then one time I did a show in West Virginia, also in West Virginia, at in Morgantown. There was this thing called Soul Fuel, and there was like David Crowder and Colton Dixon and Mary, all these Christian bands,
Yeah.
and my face was on the poster too. And I was like, which one does not belong? Anyway, it was an outdoor event, and I know you know as a comedian what outdoor events are like.
I've done festivals. I'm doing one
Yeah,
again this year too. Yeah, I know what you're
but
saying.
they're hard because you have to read faces because you can't hear the laughter. It escapes. And it was 98 degrees and there was no
Ouch.
shade, and we're all dying out there. And I'm thinking this is the worst thing. And it wasn't well attended. And I come off stage and I'm thinking nobody cares that I'm even here. And I look at my booth, and my poor wife and daughter are slinging shirts because the line is really long. Everybody bought
Oh,
stuff. It was like,
praise
okay, it
God.
did work. Yeah. But there's been moments where I think this is the worst moment, and then it turns out to not be. I mean, I had my guitar break on a trip one time, and I show up and I get to that part, and I didn't even tune it because I was like, I just played it yesterday. And I grabbed the guitar, I put it on, and I noticed that not everything's connected. So that big 20 minutes of my show was gone. I couldn't do any of the
Oh,
musical comedy, and I was like, oh. And the teens were there. They were doing a prom, an alternate to a prom. It was a Christian school.
yeah, a Christian alternate from.
Yeah, they're dressed in prom dresses and tuxedos, and I'm in a t-shirt and jeans. And they're like,
Oh,
you should probably go home. But the food was good, so that was okay.
no. What do you call it? As a pastor, as a comedian, where do you see our country now? Where are we?
Oh,
What do you think?
I think that we just filled our lives with everything else, and we don't know how to fit God in when He should have been the foundation of everything that we do. And I think that I watched as a youth minister for 20 years, and with like when I was a kid, I used to say there was no travel baseball when I was growing up. Turns out I just wasn't good enough for travel baseball, but there was some. But they didn't do Sundays, they didn't do Wednesday nights because we had Bible class, and now it's like they could care less that we're trying to worship our Creator. we just fill our lives, and we think that our kids have to have all this extra stuff. And I'm not trying to be judging all those people, but I'm just saying, like, we've gotten it backwards in the sense that, it's like that old story about the jar and had all these, rocks and gravel and sand, and how do you put it all in? It's like you put the big stuff in first, right? Otherwise it all don't go in. So God has to be first as the foundation. And I think we've lost that. I think we also have no, we use this word tolerance all the time. And I've really discovered that the word tolerance is just another way to disguise hate, because how would you rather me talk about you? Like, Naz, right? And I'm like, yeah, I tolerate him. That doesn't sound good. But if they say, Naz, and I go, yeah, I appreciate him. Then you go, oh, okay. So I learned to appreciate people. I think we've gotten to this thing where it's like, everybody wants everybody else to accept who they are, but they're not willing to do that for anyone else. They're not ready to find middle ground. And I think that's what's really hurting our country, is that, if you don't agree with two major things on someone else, then you won't agree with anything, even if it's a good idea. And I'm like, we've messed up,
Do you ever feel like you need to write political stuff or perform political stuff, or like, oh, you're so frustrated you want to go on stage and say it?
There have been times I just stay away from it, just because, I want everybody to shut that part off of their brain for the next hour.
Right.
I don't want anybody to be like, I don't know where he's going to go with this, and so I just stay away from it. And even if I know that it's a safe room, I may have made a mask joke or something. And one time I talked about diabetes, and I said, my doctor told me I had borderline diabetes, and I was like, oh, border, let's build a wall around it, make McDonald's pay for it. And so that's about as political as I got. So
Okay, I know what you're saying. Like, we feel as comedians, we're Christians, and we're frustrated with sometimes with all this attacks, but at the same time, we're going, what is my job? I'm called to encourage and lift people up and entertain them, and it just kills you. But have you ever done jokes where you felt your own congregation might not like it, but you still did it because you believe, as a comedian, you want to say what you feel?
There are, so I have some, like, seventh grader humor comes out. I have a song that I do that's a parody of When You Say Nothing at All, and it's when you hear nothing at all. It's about flatulence, so I've had people hear that song and go, why did you do that? So I get that. It's like, but I try to I just don't write that stuff. I write just, there's been dark things that come to my mind. Like, I was with a bunch of kids one time, and they said, Haas, you're a giant. You should be a superhero. And I said, I can't be a superhero. My parents are still alive. And it's a brilliant joke, but I don't want to use it, because what if somebody's parents aren't alive and they're in the room and they're dealing with that right then? I don't want to do that to them.
That's hard. Now, in your comedy, you use stories, you use music, and use different, what do you call it, sounds and all
Sound
that.
effects, yeah.
Sounds effect. Is that something that you've done when you were little and that you?
Oh yeah, it all started when Police Academy came out. Now,
that guy, remember?
Yes, and I was like, that's my hero. And I thought about this. Like, of course, I saw all my shows. My dad recorded them off of TBS and on VHS, so we had to fast forward through the commercials. And there were no cuss words or nudity or anything like that in the movies we watched, because they were all recorded off TV. So I've seen things that I probably shouldn't have watched if it was the original cut, But I saw him and I was like, man, I can do that, And I remember messing with my dad, sitting in the back seat, and he went a little bit over the speed limit. And so I was like, oh yeah, I can whistle without puckering up. So I was like, and my dad slams on the brake, it's like, and I'm like, this is awesome. And I learned all that from watching that guy. I was like, if a human voice can make that sound, I'm going to figure it out. And
Oh,
so
that
that's what I've been doing all my life, you know.
mentioning TBS and watching stuff. You just shot your dry bar comedy. How was that?
It was a great experience. I did it back last May. It takes a long time to come out because they were doing like 6 comedians every weekend for a year, and so that's a lot of people to edit. Um, they treat you like a king. You do 2 sets in one night, 2 different audiences, and they kind of pick the best one or mesh the two together to make it a good show. And man, it was wonderful. I felt like I was on fire, and it was all the adrenaline was going, and it was great. And I'm looking forward for it to come out like somewhere around May or June this year. They said.
Did you have a full audience in both shows?
I did. I did. It was just
Oh,
like 2 weeks after they started letting people back in, and it was just
oh,
like right on the. I mean, because like 2 weeks before they were at tables and separated, and
yes.
so my week was the first, like one of the first weekends back where everybody was,
That's
you know.
I did it before the pandemic, so I had full audience. It was great. But then my son did it when they had tables
Oh
last
yeah,
year. So they had tables and there were like 30, 40 people in each show, less than 40 people actually. So they're gonna edit it and it's coming out in this April. So hopefully it'll be good.
cool.
But what do you say to someone who's on the line? Like, I am. I'm a Christian. I went to church when I was little. Yeah, my parents were believers, but they're on the border right now. This pandemic is making them scared and all that. What do you say to them? How do you get them across?
Yeah, I, for me, I'm just telling you, like, I go back to what I said about, should you do education? You're worth the investment in you. And even if, and I mean, I'm a strong believer. I have no doubts that what we're doing is the right thing. But even if on the other side there's nothing, I've lost nothing. And if I and when I see what I know will happen, I've gained everything.
Hmm.
And you go through this. It's like I watched people at our church get frustrated and scared, like everybody else. We don't know enough. We don't want. And one lady, just a spiritual hero now. She's like, "Listen, God's going to save me either from it, in it, or through it. And like, I can get saved from it and not have it. I can get it, and He's going to save me while I have it, or I'm going to meet Him because of the complications or something." She's like, "I'm going to be saved. I'm going to be okay." And
Oh,
I'm
that's a
like,
good way.
that's what we need, is that kind of, faith. It's not, if it weren't for my faith, I'm not making it past today. I mean, just, we got to have to look at God and say, I need you. And He's like, I want you, because He doesn't need us, but He wants us.
Amen. Now, how can people get a hold of you, Haas? If they
Yeah.
want to book you for their company, their church, their event, what can they do?
Yeah, go to haasridgeway.com. There's a contact there. You can find me on Facebook. Just type in Haas Ridgeway. There's really only one on there. And if you're on Twitter, it's at Haasage, because you've heard of the Ice Age. You're living in the Haas Age. It was something I did a long time ago. It was silly. But yeah, you can contact me there, and it's coming to me. I get all the contacts. So I would love to be anywhere. I love doing what I do and sharing this message. So
That's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to be with you in about 3 weeks,
yeah,
the
that's
19th
right.
of February in Franklin, Indiana. We're going to have a free comedy concert. 2 comedians, and bring your friends, your neighbors. It's all free. And
Yeah,
just start inviting people. And if you know anybody in that area in Indiana, Ohio, just invite them to the event. And thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy with both comedy and ministry. So
no
I
problem.
appreciate your time, and we'll see you. I'll see you on the 19th.
All right. We'll
All
see you
right.
then, bro.
God bless you. Thank you so much.
You
Thank
got
you.
it.
And you guys, thank you for watching. And I want you to know tonight at 8:30 p.m. and every weeknight on Facebook at Comedian Nazareth, we have the Live with Nas show where we laugh for an hour. And at the end of it, we ask you if you have any prayer requests. So 8:30 p.m. tonight. And every weeknight, we'll see you on Live with Naz under Comedian Nazareth. Please subscribe to this. Please let your friends know. Please share it. And we'll see you next week. Next week, on the Laughter for All podcast, we're going to have a voiceover actress that's very famous. And you know a lot of her characters. So she's going to be on the show with us. So we'll see you then. Thank you so much, guys. And God bless you.